tonight, eh?
Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. I feel like I should be like the dude, you know. I feel like I should count it down or something, and you know, on all of Ken's podcasts and all that, he's got this, you know, where they're hanging out and all that stuff. I feel like I should count it down and everything.
You do like Lawrence Welk, give it a 1 and a 2
and a 3. I feel like I should have some sort of snappy start, but I don't. That's why I already hit the button 30 seconds ago. We just ease into it conversational wise. So I don't want to. Yeah, you guys are here tonight, and I won't tell you who's in the green room because it's a surprise.
Okay.
Oh.
But we're actually recording this on December the 11th, and I believe we are going to publish this on December. What was yesterday? The 10th. I believe we're going to publish this on the 17th of December.
Wow.
Or the 18th, whichever Monday is. So tonight we're going to do our State of the Union with none other than the editor. Well, he's the publisher, the editor, the CEO, the chief bottle washer, the big guy in charge, the man they go to when there's a problem. The guy that sees the light, none other than Joe Fugate of Model Railroad Hobbyist.
Excellent.
It's our once a year State of the Hobby that we've been doing now. Well, when we get Joe in here, he'll remember. So I haven't even told him. There, I gotta stop saying so much. You know the problem I'm having right now with editing the podcast is that I'm annoying the crap out of myself.
Ooh, that makes it tough. that could be particularly irksome on a long trip, say to Springfield, where I'm sitting next to you listening to it.
Yeah. It's really tough to edit a podcast when the most annoying person on it is yourself.
Oh. That sounds harsh.
Well,
sometimes the truth hurts.
Yeah, sometimes the truth hurts. I'll tell you, I was somewhere yesterday listening to one of them, and I'm like, oh my God, would you shut up for 5 minutes? All right, so I didn't tell Joe, but we have, it's Tony Cook, the editor of Model Railroad News, the creator of HO Collector Quarterly Collector, the guy that created HOScaleResource.com/org/ this is Tony's life. The host of AML Product News, the host of the X2F Files, none other than Tony Cook, all the way from Plattsburgh, Missouri.
Good evening. Boy, that resume makes me tired.
Yeah.
I just have a question for Tony. We're going to have to get a referee between you and Joe, because you're competing entities in the model railroad media industry.
Well, here's what happened. Here's what happened, Bruce. I feel like that White River Productions and Model Railroad Hobbyist are not like. I don't want to mention any names. I don't want to mention initials, but their initials are Kalmbach Publishing.
Okay.
These other two companies seem much more relaxed about the fact that other magazines exist. And so I said to Tony, hey, would you like to be there when we're talking to Joe Fugate? And he said, yeah, that sounds like fun.
Well, there you go.
So that's how we ended up. I haven't asked Joe yet, so we'll ask Joe and see what he says.
I'll be ready to make a quick exit.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'll get your back, Tony.
Yeah, Tony, if I start kind of, with the eyebrows towards the door.
I'll head on out.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. And also with us tonight is Bruce, the moderately agitated mailboy.
Yes.
He's maybe we should just start listing all the shows you've been on so you can get a long-winded introduction like Tony Cook.
Been on a modeler's life.
Yeah, but
that's about it.
The co-host of and you started your career at AML will be by being the mailboy on those early flights.
Yes, that's true. I was strapped on my milk crates and cushions in the back.
That's right.
The cabin there, and that was it.
That's right. We haven't talked about that in a dog's age. That was something that we never thought about. that the thing would go on for so long. There'd be memories.
Yes, there's memories and then there's memories.
Yeah. All right. We'll get Joe in from the green room. Joe, come on in.
Well, hi guys.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening, Joe.
Yes.
So, Joe, I know you're very familiar with Bruce the moderately agitated Mailboy, but this guy,
Yes.
this guy over here on the other corner of the table is Tony Cook, and he's the editor of Model Railroad News, and he works for White River.
What?
And he works for a company called White River Productions.
Yes.
And I took the liberty of asking him to join us because I thought, how cool would it be to have two model railroading magazine editors?
Yeah. It's too bad you couldn't get the Big K to participate as well, but they kind of feel like there's only one publisher in the world, and that's them. So.
Yes. I actually don't. I've never talked to them about anybody being on the podcast. Because whenever I see them at the shows or something, they kind of get all wide-eyed, and Cody will see me, and they'll be, hi, Lionel. And I'm like, all right, don't worry about it. I won't ask you to talk to me.
Yeah.
Actually, I like Hal. Hal, the new editor. I think I like Hal.
So do I. Yeah, I do.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. I had a picture of a kit bash of the old Varney Aero train that I wanted to use. That if you guys remember from that one, I think it was one of the Kallenbach HO primer soft covers from like the 60s. A guy had cut the locomotive end of the Aero train with the observation end and made like a doodle bug thing out of it. And I wanted to use that picture in an HO collector, and he gave me permission to use it. So yeah, no, I think he's a great guy.
He seems approachable to me.
Yes, exactly. That would be the word. Yeah.
So I think I'm actually going to approach him and ask him if he wants to be on the podcast. I'm not.
Well, I'll tell you what happened with us. Ken Patterson does his weekly podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And a while back, he had Steve and Cynthia Priest
Yes.
on there, and which was great. I love doing that sort of thing. And so he talked to Hal. And at first, Hal was like, I don't know. But then he finally kept twisting Hal's arm and convinced Hal to go ahead and try to come on Ken's podcast.
Oh.
And then, so Ken said, I got to check it with my boss. Well, you can imagine what happened. The boss goes, no, you're not going to do that.
Because other people talking about model railroading does not exist.
Yeah.
It's like you're pretending that the speed limit didn't drop. The cop pulls you over and says, you know what, you're doing 47 and a 30. No, I'm not. It's 50. No, there was a sign back there, about a half a mile. No, there wasn't. Yeah, there was. And it's the same thing. It's like, I have very much enjoyed my time with Kallenbach, and I learned so much I will never be able to. But it's kind of like we're all out here now. So anyways, enough of that talk. So, Joe, we were talking before we brought you in from the green room, trying to remember when we started doing the State of the Hobby with Joe Fugate every year. And was that not about 1977 we started that?
Yeah, something like that. Back when right after the bicentennial, I think. That would be about right.
Yeah, that's right. It was right after the bicentennial. We said, hey, let's go ahead and do that.
I remember that show. It was what our hobby manufacturer's going to do with all that leftover red, white, and blue product. I remember that.
Yeah. There, I did it. Just did it. Now I veered off the road. So, Joe, I was going to tell you, this is the first time we've done the State of the Hobby with Joe Fugate since the last time we did it.
Yes, something like that.
So, and
that's been his running joke lately, Joe. This is the first podcast since our last podcast, and it's one of those that takes me a second of, well, yeah, okay, all right.
What were you going to say, Joe? You were going to say last time.
Well, last time my wife Patty was.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's right. She did join us, didn't she?
This time it's just you just got me, so you got the lesser half of the two. So
I remember last year, you were getting ready, you've taken down your layout, the Siskiyou line, and you're getting ready to move, or stuff was happening. What's happened in the life of Joe Fugate, the personal life of Joe Fugate, that you can tell us about since last year?
Okay. Can I mention something that's like once in a lifetime that has absolutely nothing to do with trains?
Well, let's kick it around the table. Tony, what do you say, yay or nay?
Oh, I think most definitely. Yeah, people always like to hear, what we do outside of the model railroading world.
Bruce, yay or nay?
I'll give her a big thumbs up.
Okay, I was going to go thumbs down, so that's 2 out of 3. So you're in. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just keep it short.
No, no, don't keep it short. Tony's right. Everybody loves to hear this stuff.
Okay, well, it's a big deal to me. It's one of those once in a lifetime sort of things. Basically, I was adopted, and I found out when I was 18. Well, my mom always told me ever since I can remember that I was adopted. But then when I was 18, she gave me my adoption papers and my original birth certificate. And my original birth certificate had my mother's maiden name on it. And I was born out of wedlock in 1955. That was a big,
yeah,
it was like not cool.
Not cool.
Right. But my father's name was blank. And I also found out that my original name, I won't give out any last names here because there's some sensitivity around my conception. And so I don't really want anybody to feel upset that I say this in public.
Sure.
Okay, right. But my original name would have been David Lynn, and then a last name that's not the last name that I have now.
Okay. And so that you were giving up your birth name was David Lynn and a different given name.
Right.
And then when you were adopted, do you know what age you were adopted at?
I was adopted. In fact, the adoption was prearranged before I was even born.
Oh, okay. So how does that work then? I guess I don't know adoption very much.
Well, basically what happened is when I was 3 days old, my adopted parents came to pick me up at the hospital, and away I went. And I've since reconnected with my birth mother.
Wow.
Her family. I found out I have 2 half-sisters. I have an adopted sister. And then when my adopted dad passed away at 55 from heart issues, my mom remarried, and so I have 2 stepsisters. So I'm surrounded by pink.
Yeah. So you got, how many stepsisters do you have altogether? 3?
Well, I have 2 stepsisters. I have 2 half-sisters on my mom's side.
Right.
And then I have an adopted sister that's part of my adopted family.
Wow.
Well. Both of my parents couldn't have kids, so both of us were adopted.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The birth fathers remain a mystery, and in talking with my birth mother, it's a sensitive subject, and it appears that she might not have been totally she was kind of prevailed upon, then ended up getting her pregnant. So the question has always been, who's my dad?
Right.
And she didn't, either she doesn't know or she doesn't want to tell me.
Right.
Okay. So we did a DNA test. And I now know which family line I am in on my dad's side.
And your dad is Stan Mikita of the Chicago Blackhawks.
Oh, don't you wish? Actually, what was interesting, I'll just tell you, this is
yeah, keep going. It's really interesting.
Okay, the only thing I knew that my adopted mom told me when she gave me my adoption papers is she says the only thing we know is your dad was in the Air Force. Okay?
Right.
Okay, so the DNA test proved that conclusively who my grandfather was through my DNA. And my grandfather has 2 sons and a daughter. Okay.
Yeah.
The 2 sons were in the Air Force.
Cool.
How's that grab you?
Yeah.
One was career Air Force and has 3 daughters. And the other one was went in the Air Force for 1 term and then was in the reserves. And he's the younger one. Both would have been old enough to have encountered my birth mother. So the question is, who is my daddy, right? Who's your daddy?
Right.
Uh, so one of the daughters of the career Air Force guy has agreed to take a DNA test.
Oh, cool.
And so, uh, it was funny when because you can imagine what are you going to say in an email to somebody? But I managed to get the email of one of the daughters of one of the brothers that was in the Air Force, which potentially would be my half sister. Okay,
Right.
so I got her email, and I sent her an email, and you're always wondering, are they going to think this is a scam?
Yeah.
Oh, oh, by the way, I'm from Nigeria, and
Yeah.
I might be your relative, right? And give me your bank account, and I've got all this money I want to give you, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Send,
So I happen to be working with my daughter on Ancestry.com building a family tree.
right.
And so I actually took a screen snap of that family tree and I included it as an attachment in the email to this potential half sister. Okay.
Yeah.
And her response was priceless. She goes, "Holy crap. When can we talk?"
Oh, that's
Oh,
fun.
wow. That's neat.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm now in contact with them, and she has agreed to take a DNA test because we all want to find out if I'm either her cousin, which would be the son of the other guy, the
Right.
other brother, or I'm her brother. So yeah, and it's just uh, finding all these people. I have aunts and uncles I didn't know I had. I've actually met some of them now. Um, it's mind-boggling.
Well, yeah, and this sounds like this is all reasonably recent.
Yeah, it was in October. I back in the '80s. I actually my when my adopted dad passed at 55 from heart issues.
Right.
I said to my mom, I said, I'm not actually related to my dad, but he just died of heart at 55. I said, I need to find my birth family and find out some background. If for nothing else, I want to know what my medical
Sure.
situation might be, in the future. I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah.
So the original adoption was actually arranged through a family shirt tail relative who knew the family, who knew my birth mother's family, and knew that she had gotten the her the family's daughter there had gotten herself pregnant out of wedlock.
Right.
And she knew that my parents, who ended up adopting me, were looking for a kid to adopt, and they were on waiting lists as long as your arm. And so this uh, family friend, whose name is Sadie, she actually basically she worked in the courthouse as an executive secretary, and so she actually had all the connections that she could arrange a private adoption. So she set that all up, and so that's how I was adopted. And but um, the thing was, my daughter was wanting to find my birth family, and of course I said when I had my dad passed, I wanted to find him. So we talked to Sadie, and Sadie talked to my grandfather,
Wow.
my birth mother's dad, and he goes, "No way.
Huh.
We do not want this kid coming out of the closet. This is a delicate situation, and just leave it alone." So that was the response I got in the '80s. So he's since passed away, um, and so then in October, my daughter said, "Dad, I have a good friend on Ancestry.com who'd be willing to help us. Let's see if we can try again and find the family." And I said, you know, they may not want to know about me.
Right.
So just be ready to have basically talk to the hand.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. And in a matter of a couple of days, we had located my mom's side because we had a name and an age to go on. And so then we started contacting different family members. And before long, I found out that my birth mother is on Facebook. She's 85
Wow.
and in great health. And I found I had two sisters, and we now have. Um, I talk with the oldest sister uh, every day.
Oh, neat.
We have, like texting and stuff we do on the internet. Plus, they all have Facebook pages, so we
Yeah.
all post stuff on each other's Facebook pages. So that's how that worked. But then the question was, what about the father side? And so that's when we worked with my daughter's friend who's on Ancestry, and we did the DNA test, and kaboom, here we go. Uh, we now have it narrowed down to one of two brothers, and and since the daughter of the one guy is perfectly willing to do a DNA test, that will tell us, because she will come back either as my half sister or as my cousin.
Wow. So that'll be so. And neither of these guys are still alive, I'm assuming.
Uh, the older one died in 1992.
Right.
And the younger one is still alive, but has really bad. He's like 84, and he has
Sure.
really bad Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And so if it turns out he's my dad, if I ever visited him, he would probably have no idea
You're
who I
right.
am.
Exactly. Sure. Yeah. My dad passed away of Alzheimer's, and after a while, they just don't know who you are. Although he did think I was his brother Archie, and we used to have great conversations about World War II.
So yeah, and it's fascinating to learn all the history, because then now that I know my family name on my father's side and my family name on my mother's side, bio families,
Yeah.
I can go back and research those family names and find out that a whole bunch of my family was very heavily involved in the Revolutionary War, and were like captains and commanders and all these, and helped found the United States. And it's like, whoa, that's a whole set of history that I never even imagined that I could say was my heritage. But
Yeah.
it's like, whoa.
Isn't that something? Now, Joe, you said you first pursued this because your adoptive father had health problems. Had you wondered before? I had a really good friend that was adopted the same as you, basically before he was born, and I can remember asking, are you curious or do you want to know? And he said no, because it's no different for me than it would be with your parents. They were always my parents, so I never really gave it a lot of thought. So was it something that you always wondered about?
Oh, well, you always wonder, when my mom handed me my adoption papers, and I look on the adoption papers, and here's this woman's signature.
Right.
And I'm looking at this, and I'm going, who is this woman? I'm thinking, who is this family? What is the story here? And then, of course, the big blank space where my dad's name was, should have been. It's like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
Who was this guy? Was it like, uh, you know, uh, Bill Gates, or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So let me ask you, in its early days now,
right.
what's your initial emotional feeling about how you feel? I'm sure you loved your adoptive parents because they looked after you. Do you feel like that will stay exactly the same, and now you'll just add to your family, or like, what's your initial feelings? Like, you're just thrilled to know do these people feel like family, or do they just feel like really close really close people, or like, are the feelings changing every day, or?
Uh, it does make you reevaluate everything, but I think that first of all, my adopted dad and mom are my dad and mom. They
Right.
raised me. That'll never change. I can't pretend that those people aren't extremely important, and just I just have a connection with them that's a
Right.
real deep connection, right?
Yeah.
These other people, it's fascinating to learn about these other people, and what's interesting to me is to find out how accepting they
Yes.
are of me. And like this one woman that's going to do the DNA test that may be my sister. She's a total kick. I am just having a ball. She's texting me every couple of days. She said to me, she says, "I've decided that I'm going to call you my brusin." Says, because when I'm talking about you, I need to be able to refer to you somehow. And the other thing I found out is that we had tried to reach out and connect with a couple other relatives in my father's line as well, and hadn't really got a lot of connections. And then all of a sudden, these other people after I contacted this first woman and we talked on the phone, she was like totally excited. And so then these other people that I'd contacted, which would be another of her sisters and then a cousin,
Right.
to be the daughter of the sister to my dad. Okay. I'd contacted them, and all of a sudden those people contact me now, and they go, "Man, I just got this phone call from your possible sister, and she's like just like stunned excited, and so you must be legitimate, and so yeah, we would like to talk to you." So it was really funny to, and one of the sisters goes, "Man, she woke me up, got me out of bed, and talked to me and says, hey, we might have a brother." And
Right.
so she was just really excited. So it was fun to see that rather than being this family skeleton that nobody wanted to hear from,
Right.
that they're like, "Oh wow, we could have a brother, we could have whatever." So it's just fun, and to find out what these people do. I mean,
Yeah.
find out that my dad, both of the brothers were university professors after they got out of the military. And then to find out that the one lady that I contacted who's doing the DNA test, she's a oncology pharmacist.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm finding all of these, and apparently several people in the family are highly respected musicians, and it's like, wow, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, so you're going to eventually set up a meeting with, if you can, once you know for sure.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, one of them, the cousin of this woman that's doing the DNA test, it might be my sister, which would be my cousin, regardless. She's big into genealogy, the family genealogy. And so as soon as she found out about me, she's like, "We need to talk."
And the craziest twist of the whole thing is the one sister that you're in contact with now. Her husband is a huge Mopac fan and has a 30 by 40 layout in his basement, mushroom style layout that he calls the Mizuo lines.
I see. Well, I haven't found any model railroaders yet,
Yeah.
but
I bet
we'll see, huh?
I bet you they're fascinated by your lifestyle too, of having the magazine and everything.
Well, I told my possible sister about what I do, and she was like, "Oh wow, that's amazing," So
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I had a similar situation happen to me just, I guess it'd be a week and a half ago since when we broadcast this, but I traveled to Winnipeg to meet a World War II veteran that was with my uncle the day that he lost his life. And they'd been together for a couple of years in the war, and they weren't friends necessarily because my uncle was 37 years old and this fellow was 22, but they were both signalmen, and it was Ernie's turn to go into town, and because the most poignant moment of the weekend was after we'd been chatting, and I'd shook his hand about 10 times. We'd been chatting about 20 minutes. He says, "How old was your uncle?" I said, "Well, he was 37. He says, "Yeah, that makes sense now because Walter was always looking after us, and it was my turn to go into town with the detail, and he said, no, you stay here and I'll go." And then anyways, my uncle was the only Allied soldier killed in the in the liberation of a town in Holland on April 19th, 1945, and I met him and it's the same thing, it's just, you just kind of, and I went and met this family and outside of Winnipeg. It's, 100 miles southeast of Winnipeg, and the three brothers have a 4,000 acre farm, and the people, nothing would do, but I had to stay with them. And it's just like, that's, if you allow yourself to embrace life, you're just going to meet and do all kinds of cool things.
Yes. I do have to say one other little quick story, and then we should talk about trains. This potential sister, she told me, she said there was a special in the New York Times a few weeks ago, and it was about DNA testing and people finding their relatives that they didn't know they had. And she said, she said, it was a fascinating piece. I read that piece, and she said, then I said to my husband, nothing interesting ever happens in our family.
And then you contacted her.
And then I contacted her. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and and that's the thing. Like, I understand that in Model Railroad Hobbyist and the pages of that magazine or Craftsman or Model Railroad, like, I understand there's no place in those magazines for these kind of stories that you just told, except this community has got so much character, the model railroading community, it works perfect on a podcast. Like, the podcast helps make the community bigger and tighter. Because,
yes,
it's something that works on a podcast. It wouldn't work in the magazine because you get to relay the story with your own voice and your own words, and it works on a pod. I think that's, again, where I would go. Social media is making the hobby so much more richer than it ever was before.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, too, because we named the magazine Model Railroad Hobbyist because we feel like whatever we do, the magazine needs to remember the modeler and not just the stuff. Okay?
Yeah.
We're real people doing this stuff. So let's let the personality of the modeler shine through when we present this material.
Yeah.
Get to know these people.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I don't care what you say. We talked about that for a good almost 30 minutes. And as far as I'm concerned, it's as interesting as anything else we'll talk about because people know you. They know you as the guy that is the publisher of the Model Railroad Hobbyist. And this is only going to enrich their thought process about Model Railroad Hobbyists. It's only going to make Model Railroad Hobbyists seem more human. It's only going to make it seem more interesting because, okay, Joe told us this whole story. And which is, like I say, I believe I actually only had this thought as you were telling me the story because I'm thinking I didn't want you to stop, and I'm thinking, well, okay, this would work in the pages of a magazine, but it does work on a podcast, and it does help make the community bigger and larger and brighter and more enriched and everything else, any other adjective you can think of.
Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys indulging me a little bit. That's one of those things where it gets really hard to concentrate.
Yes.
On doing the magazine when you've got all of these new relatives you're discovering.
Well, the excitement must have been really for a week or for a few weeks. It must have been very exciting, and then especially for your daughter too, who was kind of like the catalyst. It must have been really exciting for both of you to do it together.
I tell you that I think one of the most memorable things in my life. It'll be like remembering where I was when Kennedy was assassinated, or when the space shuttle blew up, and it's when my birth mom called me on the phone. I remember exactly where I was and exactly what I was doing, and I about fell over when I saw that it was her calling me.
And she must have been pretty emotional, was she?
She was actually quite collected,
right.
But it was amazing to think, here's this person that gave birth to me, and I've never talked to her before.
And
it was just
you're gonna go visit her or something?
Yeah, she's her and her daughters, to be my sisters, all live in Michigan. So I'm probably going to see if I can put together a road trip for business and visit some layouts, and then also go visit them while I'm on the road. So
just go, for crying out loud. Like, what do you must be, everybody knows that the magazine is so popular that you're clearing, at $800 million, $1.2 million a year, just sticking it in your pocket?
That'd be wonderful if we were, but we get by.
Yeah, well, I know Jim Sacco from City Classics is making more money than he ever could have imagined.
Now I'll have to speak up because you know that he would immediately say, "Oh, now Lionel, you know that's not true."
Yeah, I know. Exactly. And the other thing I wanted to say, which I was very touched by, when you first started your story, you didn't want to reveal last names because you were pretending that people were actually listening.
Yeah.
I thought that was very nice.
Well, the biggest concern is especially my birth mother, because she either doesn't know the guy's name or doesn't want to reveal the guy's name, and I'm not even telling her that I took a DNA test and that I probably
Right.
know now who my dad is. So it's just a sensitive subject. So
Sure.
it's
Absolutely.
best to kind of keep it in the family. So.
Well, I think in fairness to your mother, I think she gets to call the shots as far as how much of her personal life she wants to reveal to anybody.
That's right.
Would you like to know some of my personal life? No, it's not that interesting. Okay, so here's where we'll start. So that's, you know what, Joe, that's going to be yours and my. What's the word? I don't know what it is. What is it, Bruce? When it's your siren call. It's your It's your purpose. That'll be our purpose for a while. Is that the podcast gives an opportunity for the community to become enriched. So remember that when I come up to you at Springfield.
Okay.
Okay. So here's what I want to talk about first when we're going to talk about trains is Scott Thornton from Protolith.
Oh, yes.
He's becoming one of my favorite Model Railroad characters. I think what I'm trying to do is get as many people as I can at Springfield to go up to him and say, "So Lionel wants to know how many of these you think you're going to sell." You were on a show in the middle of the summer about the Proto Throttle that Scott organized. And this thing seems to me like, who was I? I was listening to I was editing one of the podcasts the other day. I was the most annoying person on it. But I think we were talking about, maybe it was viewer post or something. But anyways, the subject of the Proto Throttle came up. Who was it? Oh, I think it might have been, I think it was our friend Spoon Ostertag. Anyways, the subject of the Proto Throttle came up, and he was just going crazy for the thing. Like, everybody is going crazy for this thing. Are they not?
Well, if you're a diesel modeler, certainly. But just you wait. I think there's a steam one coming too.
Really?
Yes. It's a lot more complicated, but I started a thread saying, okay, on the MRH forum, I said, okay, steam modelers, what would your proto throttle look like? And recently, well, a lot of people started out there kind of poo-pooed it, and they said, it's too different. It would be really difficult to boil something down, no pun intended, and get something that you could hold in your hand that would simulate what you have to do when you run a steam locomotive. Meanwhile, Jack Burgess of Yosemite Valley fame,
right,
contacted me, and if anybody who's been in the hobby for a while will remember that Jack actually did a steam locomotive miniature, like a 1/4 size steam locomotive cab.
Oh yeah.
And hooked it to a true action transistor throttle. And so he contacted me when he saw that thread. And also, we about that time we also ran an article on the diesel proto throttle from Iowa Scaled Engineering. And he said, "Can I add something to the conversation?" I said, "Sure. What do you got?" He says, "Well, I did this 1/4 scale cab. I have thoughts on how you might be able to condense that down into something you can hold in your hand." And I said, "Yeah, let's do that." So he sent us a piece, and we published it in our our new Not Free magazine, which we probably should talk about here in a little while, a little more, called Running Extra. And it was a pretty good kind of analysis of what might need to go into a handheld steam locomotive throttle. And then a gentleman just posted on the thread the other day. He says, I went out and looked, and I found some really small ratcheted levers that could work for a throttle and a Johnson bar. And they're small enough they could fit in a handheld unit. So the thought process has already started. And I say just give it time. Somebody will figure it out, and somebody will give it a try. And you'll have a steam locomotive version of this, too.
Wow. That sounds...
I'm just waiting to see the fireman that goes along with it, so that he's walking around shoveling the coal while you're running.
Right, and actually, I think the bigger challenge is not going to be even trying to engineer the physical interface and the physical box, but the bigger challenge is going to be how to get a decoder to do what you need it to do. The steam decoders, all the steam locomotive decoders that are out there now, focus on mostly some basics, but mostly how do you get the locomotive to sound right. And so, it gives you functions and different things that you can fiddle with to try to make the steam locomotive do the sound that you want. But there's some interactions between like the Johnson bar and the throttle, and whether or not you've got enough water in the locomotive, or if making sure you don't let the crown sheet go dry. All of that kind of stuff affects what the locomotive does too. So how do you translate that or keep track of that? Like, for instance, much more than with a diesel locomotive, there's really, on the protothrottle, there's really not any thought given to when you run out of diesel and you need to fill up again. But with a steam locomotive, you're burning through fuel and you're burning through water and a lot more quickly, and you have to stop and fill up a lot more often. So that means you're going to have to do what us programmer types call maintain state. And so now how do you do that and then couple that with what's going on in the decoder? So there's still some challenging problems to solve.
Yeah, it's almost like you got to interface with some sort of computer calculating things for you that
yes,
somewhere flashes up something that in the water glass you're dropping down, and you better cut loose and run to the next tank type thing.
Right. So yeah, I don't think those are insurmountable problems, but they certainly will take some good thought. And the ideal situation would be if you can get the decoder manufacturers to want to have a conversation with you as you're designing the throttle. Because, like, for example, with the proto throttle, Scott and company actually talked to ESU and had a dialogue back and forth, and Matt Herman actually made some changes to the programming that goes into the decoders, the sound decoders, ESU sound decoders, to make it work better with the proto throttle. So if you can get that sort of dialogue on a steam throttle, that will be great.
Yeah, because ESU and Soundtracks, they were all over that. They were all about making it work with their their decoders. Absolutely. I mean, don't you think that the thing is just like taken off, this proto throttle?
It's easy for you to say, Lionel.
Yeah. I mean, they've barely been selling them. I guess they'll be coming up to a year soon. But I mean, these guys have been. Everybody talks about this thing. It's like the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Well, it's really, yes, it's fascinating, and I tell you, for me, it's like the hobby's never been better with stuff like this. And there's something about simulating the micro side of the hobby that, to me, is really fascinating. I think we've got the macro side of the hobby down, meaning big layout, lots of trains, dispatcher and CTC panels and signaling and and all of this stuff. This is the big picture, right?
Right.
But what about the one guy sitting at the throttle in the cab, moment by moment, trying to strategize how to make that locomotive do what he needs it to do.
Yeah.
And that's what the proto throttle gives you. And it's fascinating to go to that level too.
Yeah, well, and I got to run the proto throttle a bit. I mean, I just loved you set it at like notch 4 and use the brake to slow down and stuff like that. And it was great. I mean, and it's so well built. That's the key is, you stumbled onto some guys that know quality, and if you build a quality product right out of the box, then you're off to the races.
The thing that really strikes me is how it brings everything together too, because we've had the sound component for a while, and as I mentioned, I think on that other podcast we did, you had the true action transistor throttle, so you had the whole momentum and kind of braking stuff for years, but now it's made its way into DCC, and couple that with the sound, and then you couple that with a tactile interface that is doing what the real guys are doing as far as which lever and which knob they're using.
Right.
And then you have to start thinking like a real engineer does.
Yeah.
And it all comes together, because now when you put the brake on, you hear the brake squeal on the locomotive with the momentum, and you notch that throttle up, and the locomotive's sitting there, and you can hear the prime mover revving up according to what you just did with the notches, and then the locomotive starts to creep slowly up to speed. Just a huge sense of mass. This little bitty thing that's the size of a stapler. That's my locomotive, right? But now this thing feels like it has huge mass, and it's just. To me, it doesn't get any better. It's made the hobby way more fascinating than it ever was before, even. So it's
that's the thing. These guys have created a whole new level of. I mean, you just like you say, it creates mass, and you do it with N scale, and you're like, wow, this is like kudos to Scott for he with the idea, but I mean, Michael Peterson and Nathan Holmes. I think he's just wearing those two guys out.
The funny thing to me, though, is the reaction you get from prototype engineers when you hand them that thing.
Well, yeah.
Because one of two things. I've been at a number of shows now. We've had the proto throttle and a small layout there that they could run on, and have demonstrated the proto throttle. And I've had prototype engineers come up, and the reaction is one of two things. They either go, "Amazing. This is just like the real thing," and they're totally blown away. Or the other reaction is, too much like work. I just want to have fun running trains. I don't want to have to think I'm on the job.
Well, that's another great avenue to go down. But that was our friend. He's a regular on the shows. We call him the Spoon because he's always stirring up trouble. But he's an engineer for the Canadian National in Manitowoc. Right? He works out of Green Bay. And I mean, he saw the thing at Train Fest, and he was just going nuts for it. He just thought it was cool, and he had to get one. And it's really neat that these guys have stumbled onto something. I mean, really, I think Scott's just kind of a load, but
yeah. And the thing I think the proto throttle, given its the proto throttle,
yeah, the proto throttle.
Yeah, the thing we're talking about, the proto throttle. Given its price point, it's ideally suited to the guy who's building a small, well-detailed layout. He doesn't have a fleet of 50 or 60 locomotives. He maybe has one or two, and he's going all into doing the best looking job he can. It's an ideal thing for him to get into with his layout depicting whatever he is and the level of detail he wants to.
Right. Well, we talked about me sort of started pushing the reboot on my layout, and with things like the proto throttle, it creates an interesting mind process of thinking for me in terms of doing my next layout, because we have this thing in our magazine that for several years now we've been calling TOMA, the one module approach, and the idea is to build yourself a single module to start with, whatever the size is, 2x4, 2x6, something like that. detail it all the way, finish it all the way, and hang some staging off of each end. Now you can actually run some trains onto your module and do some switching, and maybe have another stage train just run through to create some interference, right? To
Right.
make things more interesting for you, because you got to make sure you're out of the way. Um, but the idea there is that you can start small, keep the scope small. You can actually have a finished looking layout in months instead of years or decades.
Yeah.
But the thing that happens when you now have something like the proto throttle, um, that's being small doesn't necessarily mean that it's not fun or it's less interesting. And what you can do with Toma, of course, is you can build the first module in a few months, hang some staging off of it, run some stuff around, and you might go, that was fun, but I need more layout. Okay, build a second module, finish it all the way, and all along the way you have a finished looking layout, and it slowly grows. You can keep adding modules. But the problem that occurred to me, and I'm saying this a bit tongue in cheek, but the problem that occurred to me is on Siskiyou Line 2, I'm building it with Toma, but the proto throttle makes things so fun, I may only get a few modules into Siskiyou Line 2, and I'm just having so dang much fun, I don't need to build more layout.
Yeah, it's added a whole level of fun to operation.
Yes, it has.
Just a whole level of fun, and it's like, and kudos to the guys for doing it. I mean, I talked to Michael. I want him to be on the show. Michael, I want you to be on the show. You too, Nathan. But Michael Peterson and we've talked, and I want him on the show, and he wants to come on. And Scott calls me every week to be on, and I said, not again, Scott. Just calm down, buddy. He crashed our dinner in Kansas City.
That is true. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he just walked right in. We had a dinner of 20 people, Tony, and he just walked right in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Then he started eating our hors d'oeuvres and our appetizers, and we're like, get out of here.
Well, no, I don't remember that part. I don't think I remember that.
Oh. So what do you think of the price? Because what is it, like roughly $450 to get started with it?
Yeah. The way I describe it is, it's the price of a couple of good sound locomotives.
Yeah.
Maybe, depending upon the locomotive, a good sound steamer even. But I tell you, hands down, it is way more fun than two more sound locos.
Yes. That's a very good point. That's an excellent point. Okay, so you mentioned the forum, and we've talked about this before, and I want to put in my 2 cents worth again. I wish you'd quit stopping some of those threads where everybody's arguing back and forth. It's just like, guys, just get rolling. You're 2 or 3 days into it, and then Dad comes along and says, all right, that's it. You're done. We're stop talking about this. We're finished. And it's like, oh, come on, Dad. And you're like, nope, that's it. Go to your rooms.
Well, we wait until the black eyes and the bloody noses show up, and then we step in.
And so do you monitor it pretty much every day?
Well, I'm on every day looking at what's going on, but a lot of times what'll happen is there is a link on the forum that says abuse, and so people will click that link, and so I'll get an email that says, oh, you better take a look at this thread. I don't think it's going the right way. And so I'll go take a look, and about half the time I don't think it's any big deal. I might post a post and say, well, now play nice.
Right.
But the other half the time, yeah, it's gone off the rails and it's really out in the weeds now, and people have played the Nazi card or whatever, and it's like, now it gets nasty. So then we'll shut it down.
So Tony, as the editor of Model Railroad News, the #1 product review magazine in the entire hobby, and
you can't say that. Joe's right here. Why would Model Railroad Hobbyist not be that magazine too?
Because Joe's magazine is the #1 online magazine that features modelers of all skill levels and tries to encourages everyone to partake in the hobby.
Oh, okay. I see you're working this into our. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Well, I'll just mention too that because we're ad supported, we don't do reviews. We just do what we call deluxe announcements. They're called first looks. So you
Ah,
guys do reviews. So if somebody wants, the unvarnished opinion, then you're the magazine they need to go to.
Right, and I really didn't think you guys would get into a slap fight about whose magazine is doing a better job. But okay, that's
I appreciate I appreciate the thought though.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So Tony, because you're the number one, we all understand Model Railroad Hobby is the next magazine, but because you are the editor of the number one product review magazine in the hobby, where did you guys fall down on the Proto Throttle?
we've run stuff on it before, but I don't think we've done a full review. So as far as falling down, yeah, my assistant, my editor Shane Mason needs to
Yeah.
get with that. I don't think we've run a full review for it yet.
What do you think of the price?
I think, again, I don't think that's a stumbling block. I think price is something for everything, whether it's freight cars, turnouts, locomotives, vehicles. Everybody will say, oh, that's too much, but yeah, I want one. So I think that's just part of the hobby. That again, that's part of participating in the hobby is complaining about, oh, I think that costs too much. Are you going to get one? Oh, yeah, I already ordered it. Okay.
But then again, as we
mentioned, but then again, I got to have one. So
yeah.
Were you going to say anything else, Bruce?
Oh no, it's the price type thing that a guy who's going to have 15 people over operating is probably not going to buy 15 of the things. It's
right.
going to be the guy who's got the small layout and one or two maybe.
It's perfect for that.
It's perfect for it.
And even I think even if you had a big layout, you could have somebody operating with it in the yard, and it just makes operations so much more realistic. However, talking about price, I have a good question for you, Joe, that has come up in the last year. And who was it? Oh yeah, our buddy Rob Arsenault out there in Edmonton, Alberta, home of the Edmonton Oilers. I don't believe Wayne Gretzky still plays for them, but we were interviewing him, and he came up with a really neat phrase called detail threshold. And I'm really interested in what your take is on, and I know it's been more than just in the last year, but all these models that come out with this spectacular detail. I've started to hear rumblings of people saying to me, so much detail on these things. You'll be kind of going along and pieces are falling off because they're so detailed. And he came up with this detail threshold. And I think that's kind of a cool phrase. Like, have we reached a detail threshold on our models?
I think a lot of times we have, actually. I know, I think Shane Wilson and Scale Trains are very wise to have what they call the operators brand, which is got, they have the, whatever it is, the classic brand or something, that's just your very basic. It's like, the blue box level detail, right? And then you've got their operators brand, and then they've got the rivet counters brand. And I think Shane's very smart. Shane and all his guys are smart to have that operators brand because, having an operating layout, I'm always finding brake wheels and stirrup steps and grab irons on the roadbed after an op session.
Yeah. And so it's just like I feel like they could almost step backwards a bit and less detail and a little more, people are, there's been much hand wringing about prices now and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, they've almost gone, like, where would they go next with models? It's kind of like, what more can you do?
Yes, you do wonder if we're sort of have reached the point of diminishing returns. And
yeah, like I guess the reason I kind of got stumbled there is because I was going to say a friend of mine, Chris Atkins, is building Northern Pacific layout in a Texas and Pacific section house behind his house in Argyle, Texas, which, by the way, is the home of the Fighting Sox. I love saying that. I just love saying that. Argyle, Texas, home of the Fighting Sox. Anyways, I have a whole bunch of Athearn cars kicking around, old 40-foot Athearn blue box box cars. They got better wheel sets and KD couplers. And I said to him there a couple, 3 weeks ago, I said, Chris, do you have any interest in these cars? And he was like, yeah, send them to me because, you need so many cars. They'd be great fillers. So, you can only buy so much of this highly detailed stuff anyways.
Well,
then you get back to Alan McClellan's, good enough rule, like the 3 foot rule. Like, if you're looking at an HO car from 3 feet away or an HO locomotive from 3 feet away, how much of all that extra detail are you actually going to see?
And in fact, I take it even one step further. I had a discussion about this in one of my editorials. 3 feet away, and we're talking about a hobby where the trains run. So it's 3 feet away and the trains are moving. So now you tell me how many louvers that locomotive has on it, right? And does it have the right number of louvers at 3 feet away when it's moving? So yeah, there's I tell you, I can get so involved in operating and so focused on operating when something's very complex switching problem, an industry with a bunch of tracks. I can get so involved at the end of the session, if somebody asked me whether or not that locomotive had handrails, I couldn't tell you.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Because that's really where the hobby really shines, is when you start to do operation. And that's not to say that if somebody doesn't have a giant operating layout, they shouldn't be in the hobby. Because as you said, you can have an operating layout 2 feet by 4 feet.
Oh yeah.
Right. And what? Go ahead.
I think a lot what we've seen as the market did start to skew upward, of everybody getting more road specific, more detail, we've also seen kind of that return with the Walthers mainline. Atlas a number of years ago brought out its Train Man. Walthers has had Train Line as well as their Proto. That the different levels, I think we're seeing that is offering more variety. That do you need an SD70 ACE with everything? It's like, okay, then there are companies that offer that. If you'd like to have one that just runs and doesn't have all that extra stuff, there are those as well. So I think there was kind of that spike of everything really getting, as you say, is it too detailed? But now I think we're seeing more and more, again, whether it's scale trains with, the operator and rivet counter, that trying to satisfy all levels of the hobby interest, whether you're a collector that wants something beautiful to sit on a shelf that'll never turn a wheel, or somebody that wants to operate it all the time and isn't as concerned.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I kind of enjoyed, years ago taking my Atlas Jeep 7 with the molded on handrails. And, I enjoyed, shaving off the handrails and adding, individual handrails. Like we don't want to lose the whole aspect of modeling. I think some of these companies, they could find a place for, models that aren't as detailed. I don't think it's the end of every time I go to a show, Scale Trains is announcing something else. And you're kind of like, I'm scratching my head thinking, where are these guys going to go next? Or Rapido. Now, here's a question for you, Joe, that's been pressing on my mind. Scale Trains has a couple of big announcements coming out in Springfield,
right?
Which is about a month away, 5 weeks away from now. Do you know of those announcements? Like, has Shane confided in you what they are?
Not me, but he, I don't, to be honest with you, I don't follow the product releases quite as closely as someone like Jeff Schultz.
Okay.
On our staff does, because he's a product guy.
Right.
And when we go to conventions, he's the guy running around talking to all the vendors and getting pictures of all the new announcements and posts them on our web. And also, he's the guy that keeps up our Facebook page. So I've seen some stuff go flying by on our Facebook page that there are some big announcements coming at Amherst. And so it wouldn't surprise me that that's one of the things that are shown. And as to whether or not they've actually told him what it is, maybe.
Okay, so that's where I was headed, because I know Tony always knows. And we were interviewing John Sacerdoti the other night, and he knows, and I'm thinking, like, why can't Shane tell me some secret?
Sometimes they tell us so, Lionel, and they say, make sure that you mention to Lionel Strang that you know. And I'm like, why? you need me to tell him, or are you going to tell him too? Oh no, we're not going to tell him. But just make sure you mention that we told you. So, I mean, make of that what you will.
Yeah, so I guess I can take some solace in the fact that that Joe doesn't know, but that's only because probably Joe hasn't investigated. He could probably call Shane up tomorrow and he'd tell him.
Yeah, but to be fair, Tony did told me not to tell you.
I think I mentioned it to like my UPS delivery guy and the person that brings the mail, and
Well, about 18 months before scale trains even launched, we knew it was coming, and we knew what their first product was going to be.
Okay, so, well now you're just rubbing it in. That's cool that you know too, Bruce, because that's going to be a great story for you to tell after Springfield.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, about how when we get there and we're on Friday, we're going over to see the Celluloses with Boston Joe, and Joe will say to me, "Where's Bruce?" And I'll say, "Oh, I pulled over just outside Albany and let him out."
Exactly.
So I'll say, I'm guessing now he's maybe almost to Albany.
Yeah, he might have got it right.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe. Huh?
Yeah, maybe. So what's the deal with this magazine now? I'm all confused. Is it free? Is it not free? What's happening here now?
Okay. In about 2006, we actually peaked as far as size, and there was this thing we threw around, Forever Free, and so the one thing that I tell people is what Forever Free means is that the number of pages that ads will pay for, that's free.
Right.
And I don't think anybody would ever expect us to run the business into the ground and go bankrupt by printing more pages than we could afford to print. And when I say afford to print, people go, well, what's the big deal? I mean, it's just there's no paper, there's no ink. What's to afford? Well, we pay people for our articles that we get. And so the number one single largest expense is the payment to authors.
Okay.
For what we publish. So, back in the...
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just want to ask you this question before I get... So do you try to pay competitively with some of the other magazines in the industry?
It depends. I would say we're in the ballpark, but I would suspect, I haven't seen lately what the rates are that Model Railroader pays. I would expect that they probably pay a little better than we do.
Okay.
But I think we're probably similar to what like Craftsman pays. I don't know what Model Railroad News pays, but I would think that we're all sort of in the same ballpark.
Yeah, okay. So and it's right there on I think it's somewhere on your website. It tells you how much you get paid and everything. It's not a secret or anything.
No.
To interrupt Joe, what Lionel, one of the things on that too, and I think Joe, I remember listening in one of his podcasts with you, it really depends on what the submission is. I mean, if you're going to have it handwritten on yellow legal pad with Polaroid snapshots in the mail, that's a lot of work for me to get it onto print. But if you hand me something that's basically print ready and has been, worked, again, I think as far as pay goes, it's really hard to say it's, $50 a page or it's $100 per article. That it kind of depends on what it is and what shape you get it in. Like, is it ready to drive, or am I going to have to get tires for it?
Yeah.
Right, and I'm sure Tony can tell you about. I don't know how much you guys actually in the news publish submissions that are sent from the hobby at large versus staff content, but for us, we get a lot of submissions from the hobby at large. And I'm amazed at the stuff that people send and expect us to try to publish it. Almost literally the back of a napkin at times. And I'm surprised how people don't think through the amount of work that they're making for us. And it is true. If someone makes us work real hard to try to get your content ready to publish, then I'm not going to pay you as much because you made us do all the work. Right.
Yeah, and you came up with the idea maybe, or in the basic, but you still had to. You got to have it to a certain. It's got to meet a certain bar to meet the quality, the overall quality of the magazine.
Sure.
Well, and it's tough because I don't so much in Model Railroad News because it is more product review based, but in HO Collector, oh yeah, I get a lot of things where somebody says I collected Varney or Revell, and here's like, research work I've done and some pictures. And as Joe says, sometimes it's great stuff on a disc that they're great high resolution pictures, and other times it's, well, this isn't going to work, or this is going to need a lot of work to get there, but let's see what we can do. So, you never know. The great thing is, though, is all that information that does come in, those different points of view, those different voices that add so much to the hobby. And I find that with HO Collector, the surprise of finding out things that, wow, I didn't know that was ever made before. I'd heard about that, but that guy actually has one. So that's kind of the neat fun side of it too, though.
Right. Yeah. And it's fascinating to see, what I tell people is I say the number one thing that we care about more than anything else is good pictures. And I said the main reason why we care about getting really good pictures is because if you take a lousy picture, Photoshop's good, but it's not that good. I can't take a blurry photo or a poorly lit photo or a poorly composed photo where the model's, this little speck and you took a picture of the whole room. I can't zoom in enough to see the detail and get it to come out in Photoshop. So number one, we need good photos. I actually have people on staff, like one of our copy editors used to work for the Oregonian newspaper. Okay. So we've got copy editors that know their stuff. If you can write an email that I can understand, I tell people, then you can send us text and we can make you sound good.
Right.
And so I'm not nearly as worried about the text because you got good copy editors, you got good word processors. It's not that difficult to make the text sound good. Now, if I have to completely rewrite your dang article because you were all over the map and weren't very coherent, I will if it's a great idea. We will do that. But at times, if you got wonderful pictures but you can't talk, you can't write, then we might pass up your article. So, which is a shame because the pictures are great. But if you just can't convey the thoughts, then we may decide it's not a compelling enough topic for us to spend the effort to make it sound good.
Right, and I bet you it's very rare case where if you've got great pictures that you pass on, because I mean it can come down to a simple, you send the person some questions and they answer them. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be a writer, but you do have to take good photos.
Yes.
You can. The writing is you can take a bowl full of words and make something out of it, but you got nothing without a photo's worth 1,000 words.
Right. So that's what I tell people too, and it's funny because oftentimes when somebody's thinking of an idea, they'll send me the text and no pictures.
Yeah.
And I'll tell them, no, you got it backwards. Send me the pictures and an outline of what you want to tell me, what the pictures are about. That's how I'll decide if I am interested in your article. So,
okay, we're going to talk about the new magazine, but first, just follow along with me here, Joe. I think as the years have gone by, you've picked up on the general drift. So you have a lot of spectacular authors in your magazine, but the articles that Chris Adams has written for you are really, really good too.
Okay. Yes. Well, see, it's interesting that you bring that up. It's interesting you bring that up because where I was going with the conversation of the magazine, we peaked in 2016 with the number of the ad placements, and so the magazine actually peaked at that time at somewhere around 300 and some odd pages. Okay. And then 2 years later, and you can actually see this. You go look in a recent issue of Model Railroad Hobbyist, and then go back 2 years and look, and you will notice there is a significant drop in the number of ads in the magazine. And so the ad revenue has actually gone down 40% since its peak in 2016. And so what we've done, obviously, is we've reduced the page count to only publish the pages that we could afford to publish. But in the last 9 months, it's reached the point that we started to have to noticeably trim the magazine in size. And once we trim the magazine in size, I can't publish as many articles as I used to publish. So now there's fewer and fewer articles in the magazine. And already, if you send an article to us, I tell people it can be, depending upon whatever we're trying to do to balance the issue, each issue, it can be up to 18 months to 2 years, 18 to 24 months before your article will finally get published. Now, hopefully it won't take that long, but it might. Well, that's the worst case. I think Model Railroad is way worse. It's like 4 or 5 years sometimes before.
Yeah, and it's no different than the podcast. Like I try to stay 5 or 6 months ahead on the bi-monthly interviews because otherwise you're scrambling around. So you want stuff in the can so that you can just kind of reach in and plug it in.
Right. Well, if you think about it, from our perspective, we're trying to balance each issue. Which is easier, to have a 24-month backlog or to have a 6-month backlog of articles?
And
obviously,
I was just going to say, and well, let's make clear what you're doing as far as, if you don't have the ads, you don't have the pages. That's no different than any other magazine that's being published today. Like no magazine is like, oh yeah, we'll just keep publishing lots of pages even though the ad revenue's gone down. Like that is the backbone of the publishing industry.
Sure. So what we did is about 6 months ago, we took a hard look at where the magazine was and looked at the ad erosion that has occurred. And first thing I did is I went and said, what's going on? Why is this going on? In other words, is there something we're doing wrong? And if so, then we need to fix it. So when I started researching the topic, I started finding all kinds of stuff on the internet about how the ad-funded free side of the internet was no longer what it used to be. And so as I dug into it, it became very clear. Well, it's interesting. You just find quotes, like there's an article that Forbes did, and it said, customers, users of the internet who have been enjoying free content are going to have to get used to the notion that they're going to have less free content, and they're going to have to start paying for some of the better content. That's right in Forbes. And so it's obvious that it's not just a Model Railroad Hobbyist problem. It is the entire internet. So it's a systemic problem. And basically what's happening is Google, Facebook, and YouTube are capturing the internet advertising. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I prefer to not go into that because we could just have a whole podcast on that alone. But to validate that, I looked at the advertisers that were no longer with us. And what they'd done is they moved to Google, Facebook, and YouTube for promoting their products. So what does that tell you? So it's like, okay, so we have a systemic problem. So this is just part of what we need to get used to. We're not going to, be, internet soldiers that are going to change this trend. So how do we basically ride the trend, which has been sort of our modus operandi from day one, right? So we started thinking, okay, one of the problems, you're printing fewer pages, publishing fewer pages. We're still getting great submissions from great authors, but our backlog's piling up now because we can't publish the articles as fast as we're getting them. We need a way to get more pages to publish great articles in. So the idea came, we need a new magazine that has more pages. And we kind of went around as to what we would call it. And this magazine won't be free. We went around what to call it. Originally, we called it Model Railroad Hobbyist Premium. But when I threw that name out there in an editorial, people started going, MRH isn't free anymore. MRH isn't free anymore. And it's like, no, we want to still keep the free MRH because that's where advertisers go, okay? And that's also the entry point for new modelers to discover us. And it's not that, it's just like the paper magazines. They didn't say because ad revenue was declining, they didn't suddenly wake up one morning and declare, well, this business model has failed, so we now need to fold our paper magazine and not publish it anymore. No, they adapted, right? They simply changed the formatting and made it smaller, fewer pages, but they kept going because it still succeeds. It's just not the same as it used to be. And so our free magazine is still a successful model. It's just not as
That's not the same. It's
not the same.
Times have changed, and I mean the internet has constantly changed everything. So you're just following along with the pattern. I always liked talking to you because I always thought, you were so interested in social media, and I'm fascinated by social media. I've had a lot of, like everybody, a lot of people complain about it, but I've had 3 or 4 instances in my life in the last 2 or 3 years that have been led to nothing but great memories. And so, I mean, really, all you're doing is you're just chasing the rabbit around the room and trying to figure out where are we headed next.
Well, the biggest thing that I told the staff, even from day one, is I said, one of the things that's happened with the paper magazines is they're sitting on their laurels. Things are changing and they're not adapting. I said, one of the things we need to do is, regardless of what we do, we're not going to sit on our laurels. We are going to adapt. And I even told them in the beginning, I said, we can't expect that exactly what we're doing today is going to be exactly what we're doing tomorrow.
Oh.
We're going to have to change it. It's if there's one thing that's true about the internet, it's always changing.
Always changing.
Yeah. So anyway, MRH Premium turned out to be a really bad name because it was confusing to people. Because what we really wanted to do was spin off a new magazine that was extra pages beyond Model Railroad Hobbyist. And as we started kicking that concept around, somebody said, well, what about the name Running Extra? And it's like, oh, ta-da,
Yeah.
because that's a nice railroady name, right?
Yeah.
But it also perfectly captures what this magazine is. It's more pages than ads will pay for, is what I would call it. So then we started talking about pricing. And so we said, well, if there's anything that's true about Model Railroad Hobbyist, it's that we want to, in terms of what it costs you to get our content, if we could boil it all down, let's don't use the word free for a minute. Let's just make it even a more basic concept than that. Regardless, we are the best deal out there.
Yeah.
In terms of price. Okay.
Yep.
So we said, all right, we're going to price this thing as the best deal going. So we went out and looked, and a lot of the paper magazines are like $50-ish a year for a subscription. And then if you look around, you can usually find some discounts and some special deals and some promotions. You might get it down into the low 30s as far as a price
Right.
for an annual subscription. So we said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to price Running Extra at $1.99 an issue or $19.99 a year for 12 issues.
Yeah.
And if you look at what magazines cost now and then kind of work it backwards, those are the 1980s pricing on magazines that we're doing. And so we're 40 years behind in terms of our pricing. But, and it's Running Extra is like another 150 pages.
So is it Model Railroad Hobbyist and then Running Extra is like, and then when you get to the end of the free one, this is that's still, there's all this other stuff. Is that kind of how it works?
Kind of how it works, but we do it the other way around. So basically what happens is you get Model Railroad Hobbyist.
Right.
And in Model Railroad Hobbyist is you go to the table of contents, and on one side of the page is all the stuff that's in Model Railroad Hobbyist that you can see. And then on the other side is this grayed out, it's like a menu option that you can't access on the computer.
Okay.
It's grayed out table of contents for what's in Running Extra. And then a button that says you want to read these articles, it's $1.99.
Yes, I'm looking at it now. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually think it's blued out, but you can say gray if you want.
Okay. So that way you can kind of see what's in each issue. And if you want an individual issue, you can pay the $1.99 and
Right.
you get the issue and can download it. But if you think, wow, I like what these guys are doing enough that I just want to subscribe, then $19.99, and then you can subscribe. But the way we do it is we actually put all of the paid stuff in Running Extra. We put all the paid stuff in the front, and then we tack Model Railroad Hobbyist on the end.
Oh, okay.
And the idea is, because I didn't want to have people coming to me and going, oh, do I have to download 2 magazines now?
Right.
It's like, no, you get Running Extra, you get everything.
Right.
And see, there's a little method in my madness too, because I could see the day may come when there may be some people that read Running Extra that actually don't even read Model Railroad Hobbyist. And so if they get Running Extra and they get all the ads in the Model Railroad Hobbyist part, then we've got a larger audience that we're reaching for the advertisers, because they're getting the Model Railroad Hobbyist audience and the Running Extra audience.
Sure. Yeah. And what's the response been like so far?
So far, the people that are subscribing to Running Extra, it's been like, I am so pleased with this magazine. I love it. This is great. Because what they end up getting now is you're getting, with Running Extra and Model Railroad Hobbyist put together, you're getting 350 pages plus.
Wow.
Every month. And, I did some math, and it turns out if you look at the paper magazines, they're running about 80 pages, and they're, $6, $7 an issue now.
Oh, yeah.
And if you do the math, it works out it's about 8 cents a page.
Yeah.
Okay. So with us, with the number of pages that you get, first of all, I counted the number of images in those 80 pages, and then counted the number of images in our 350 pages. Okay. Now, not all pages, it's important to me to do a little sidebar here. Not all pages are created equal, because in Model Railroad Hobbyist, we deliberately make all the text larger so it's easy to read on a screen. Okay.
All right.
So it takes about 2 of our pages to equal 1 of the printed magazine pages. So the 350 pages is actually more like a 175-page paper magazine. But still, if you think of that, anyway, I did the math. 8 cents a page for a paper magazine. We're half a cent a page for our magazine.
Yeah.
And you're getting double the photos, too. And the other thing I will say is that we do all of our photos now at 300 DPI. We started doing that because of all of these retina displays, which are like 200 to 300 DPI, phones and tablets. So it's like print quality, crispness on your mobile device. So anyway, 300 DPI images. So you can zoom in on those images 200% and they still hold up. They don't pixelate. So how many paper magazines can you zoom in on the image and do it 200% and still see,
Well, and I think generally, obviously there's going to be people that complain. There were people that complained when I started the the Patreon thing, but you can only do so much for free, and then after a while you're kind of thinking, this is taking some of my time, and you have to start being realistic about it. And so have you been getting people been buying that? So when did you actually start this? Was December the first one, or
November?
No. And so have people been buying it as you were hoping, or?
Well, you never know for sure.
Well,
the rule of thumb is about 10% of your audience will go for stuff that costs money.
Right.
When you got free stuff, and that's about what we're seeing. So we're getting, it's right in there with what the math, the industry math would tell you.
Yeah.
There's always a part of me that hopes, well, gee, I wonder if we've got a following loyalty because of 10 years of free, that somebody will go, oh, I'll pay him a couple of bucks.
Sure.
But so far we haven't really seen that.
Okay. Well, and the other thing too, I think that people, that I think I've come to realize is like, on our Patreon channel, we have like 150 people that are involved with the podcast as deeply as they can get. And, we're still in the early stages. So there's a lot of people that aren't buying it because they're not exactly sure how to do it or whatever, like the internet is still a new thing, and not everybody embraces the internet or like with podcasts. I think it's a very, very small part of the segment of the population that actually listens to them, and the ones that have discovered them, they embrace them. But I think it's a small segment of the population. And it's the same thing with here. It's a lot of people like $1.99. Okay, now I got to get out my credit card and blah, 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 blah. And so there's that whole thing, too, where you got to just kind of push them over the line and go, no, it's not actually that hard. And you're going to be glad you did. And things like that.
Yeah, and the thing, $1.99, that's a cup of coffee.
Well, yeah, exactly. And
Right,
I think
so have one less cup of coffee a month, and you get running extra in MRH, and the first two I've seen, it's what you'd expect from Model Railroad Hobbies. It's top quality stuff.
yeah.
Well, and in fact, we're actually now that we have running extra, and we know people are paying money for it. We're actually going to start targeting some really advanced stuff in running extra, stuff that you're never going to have seen ever in the regular paper products, paper magazines, because they considered it would basically make people's eyes glaze over because it was so in depth. But we're going to go ahead and do that in running extra. And so yes, so in other words, running extra will truly be extra. In other words, the intention is that it's going to be more than MRH ever could be.
And is there a lot more work involved for you? There must be, eh?
Well, it's more pages.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a little more work involved. But basically what we do is we actually, because running extra includes Model Railroad Hobbyist,
Right.
we actually build running extra
Okay.
the last 2 months. And then what we do is we hack the running extra stuff off, and now we have Model Railroad Hobbyist.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got you. Yeah, right.
So that's actually deliberately by design too. So I don't have to paste up 2 magazines, right?
Right. You just make you create running extra, then you take out what's not going to be part of. Yeah, okay, I got it. I can follow along. And by the way, just so long as we're on the subject, you were saying that it's what, 6 cents a page or something like that? Or,
It's a half a cent a page, and the
half.
paper magazines are 8 cents a page.
Right. Half a cent a page. Well, if with the podcast, the Modeler's Life podcast, which you're on right now, you get roughly 800 minutes a month, which is, if you would sign up for Patreon, it's 6/1000ths of a cent per minute.
Wow. So one other thing I didn't want to mention, because Model Railroad Hobbyist is smaller now. It's going to be under 200 pages regularly now.
Right.
Okay. Because it's smaller, we're going to have to take a different approach than we've done in the past in terms of the editorial philosophy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to print shorter articles so that we can maintain variety. Okay, because if you get this free magazine, it's basically one article.
Right.
And you go, well, I'm not interested in that. What a waste,
Right.
So we're deliberately reorganizing the magazine and downsizing the articles. Now, that said, one thing I am very emphatically want to do is smaller doesn't mean dumbed down.
Yeah, sure.
This means shorter and more succinct, right? I'm very big on good, meaty content. So it'll be short. In some ways, some people might even say they prefer that because you can get to the point, cut to the chase, so to speak, get to the point, get to the meat, get these great insights, and it doesn't take you very long because all the articles are shorter now.
And how do you deliver the paid magazine? What form does it come in? Like a PDF or something?
It's a PDF, yes.
Right.
Just like the regular Model Railroad Hobbyist.
So hang on just a minute. So let me get this straight. See, Bruce, see if you can follow along here.
Try me.
Yeah. So let me get this straight. You've managed to create an online magazine by simply sending out a PDF to all your subscribers.
Yes.
So it's so a PDF can be done as a because there, we know the NMRA is struggling to create an online magazine. They seem to struggle in great detail with that whole concept. And then of course I got one last subject I want to cover, then we'll go.
Okay.
You seem like you got sidetracked there, Lionel, on this whole PDF hoopla.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well,
That's what we do at Model Railroad News too. We put out a PDF.
Well, you can't do that. If you talk to the NMRA guys, in charge of the magazine that costs the whole association $18 bazillion a year. You can't do a PDF. You can't send out a PDF. It's not possible.
Well, I think the difference is that in Tony's case and probably Joe's case, they're using a pen instead of a pencil, so things are penning out for them rather than not penciling out for the NMRA.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Oh boy.
So Joe, I got one last thing I want to say, or one last point I want to touch on is. I still didn't. Last year we talked about you did a survey, and I want to talk about the age of the hobby because I think the age of the hobby is way younger than anybody realizes.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
And that's a good question. I have to go back and look at our survey and see how many young respondents we've gotten over the years. I hadn't really thought about that, but my guess would be that the number of people on the young end is increasing.
yes.
But
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I can tell you that it's extremely easy on Ken's podcast to get young faces who want to come and talk about trains. And in fact, you watch the comments in Ken's podcast. You've got like one guy posts, he says, I'm 11 years old, I'm getting into the hobby, and I love your show. You know, what's the deal here? You know, it just seems like we're, you know, I can imagine if you're a youngster and you're interested in trains, what are you going to do? You're going to open up a web browser and you're going to do a Google search. And by golly, here's some YouTube stuff that comes up, right?
Right.
That's where you're going to start. You're not going to go looking for a hobby shop, and you're not going to go down to Walmart on the newsstand looking for a magazine. I'm sorry. Times have changed.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, like and I think personally, I think the hobby is going to grow. Like I've said it 1,000 times. I just don't see how the hobby can't grow and flourish because so many people are being exposed to it that never were before. It's so easy to connect with people. It's so easy to be exposed to it. Like before, and it wasn't that long ago, 15 years ago, the only way you were going to get exposure is if you went down to the local bookstore or your convenience store and bought the magazine, and then you went out and made a point of going out to a meet or something to try to find people. And it's like, now you don't have to. Like those days have come and gone.
Well, when I go to train shows, there are more and more young faces showing up at train shows. And if I can, I like to talk to those young guys. So like, I think I've told the story where I was at Train Fest, went to the cafeteria or the concession to eat my lunch. There were 3 young guys there ogling their booty, and based on the conversation, I could tell they understood the hobby. And so I had my MRH shirt on, so I'm pointing at my logo, and I said, have you heard of MRH? I go, of course. Ken Patterson's What's Neat.
Yeah. There you go.
You know, and now, you know, that was a year plus ago. And now I got many more stories to add to that, where I've talked to young people. I have a young guy come up to my booth, and he goes, I've seen you. You were on What's Neat.
Yeah.
You know, that's and all the young guys, that's what they're telling me. They're all finding me because of our stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so then I go and I look at like Model Railroader's YouTube channel, and we have twice the viewers, twice the subscribers, and twice the videos that they have. And when we post a new video, it gets 3 times the views the first month than Model Railroader's YouTube channel does. So Model Railroader, even though they've got a guy who has a history now in the internet, and so they've got the right guy at the helm now, but they still don't get it, because I will know when that guy gets it, when Model Railroader gets it, when their YouTube channel goes nuts with content. I will go, uh-oh, they finally figured it out.
Well, and I don't think you necessarily can get it. It's like why we don't make videos here, because I'm not camera worthy, and I mean you have to have the right personality for it. You know, like it's not something you can teach people. It's like you either got the personality or you don't. I mean, that's why our podcast works so well, because we all sit around and talk, and it just works out well. And it's like I said earlier in the show, in the magazine, you can't have a story about, the editor of one of the leading magazines in the hobby and how he's discovered his birth mother and blah, 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 blah. But it works on a podcast, and that's new to the hobby. The podcasting is new to the. It's a new phenomenon.
And if you got faces for radio, it's the place to go, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And you say, you talk about Ken Patterson's show, and he's got the two things. He's got the What's Neat, and then What's Neat podcast, and the weekly podcast. And of the weekly podcast, do you have one that was a particular favorite?
Yeah. Wasn't it like podcast? Was it 51? Was that the one?
It might have been 44.
44. Anyway, there was some guy on there. He was from Canada. Name started with an L.
Yeah, exactly. I just spent the weekend in St. Claude, Manitoba, which is, I just said it earlier in the show, is a teeny tiny town, 100 miles southwest of Winnipeg. And the family I stayed with, I'm in the kitchen, and they have a calendar, and one of the pictures in this calendar was an aerial shot of their farm, and it was this is the farm of the three brothers, Denny, Raymond, and Lionel. And I said, "Who's Lionel?" "Oh, that's our brother, Lionel. That's our brothers." And I'm like, "Really?" So then I'm standing out the next morning. I'm out in the farmyard, and I'm like with four guys, and I said to them, "This is legitimately the first time I've ever been standing in a circle of four guys, and half of them are named Lionel." And then, and then the crazier part was, in St. Claude, Manitoba, Lionel was a pretty common name. They reamed off like 7 other guys that were named Lionel, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I've stumbled onto the Lionel capital of the world." Yeah, I guess you had to be there. It sounds a lot. It's trust me, if you were there, it's a great story.
Okay.
This is one of those moments again now when I'm editing it and I'm driving along listening and I'm editing and I'm going, "Oh my God, would that guy shut up, for God's sake?" All right. Well, I think we covered everything, boys. That's an hour and 45.
I just wanted to quickly, since Joe brought up video, was how Train Masters TV is rolling along for him.
It's doing really well for us. I continue to be amazed at how popular it is. Maybe I shouldn't be. But we've got some great content planned next year, and we're going to be making some changes actually in the staff. But I'm excited about it actually. And I think you're going to see some. It's 5 years old now, and it's probably time for freshening up things a bit, and we'll be doing that this next year. So,
staff changes? Am I being brought back?
Well, he said he was trying to make, this is an enhancement or improvement.
That's the beauty of this thing. This podcast has lasted over 4 years now. We're closing in on 4.5 years, and it's like, Bruce, at no point did we imagine I would be able to say the question 4.5 years and, staff changes. You bringing me back?
Yes. I must say it had not crossed my mind. No.
So are you?
Am I what?
His crack team of researchers is looking at that.
Yeah, bringing me back. I was a great host.
Sure. Well, there are. I think we can find some stuff for you to do, actually.
Oh, okay, cool. That would be fun. I enjoyed it. All right, I think we've covered her all, boys. It was another, once again, the state of the hobby. I think it was well done. I really love that story about you finding your birth mother and all that stuff. And I am thrilled. I am thrilled for two things, Joe. I am thrilled that you felt relaxed enough to tell us, and you know us well enough that you wanted to tell us that story. And I'm thrilled that we discovered tonight, because you were telling that story, I was thinking, yeah, that's exactly what this podcast is. It's building the community of model railroading. It's not just what is trains, it's about the people. So thank you very much, Joe, for sharing that story with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity. It's certainly been uppermost in my mind lately. It's one of those things that's kind of hard to ignore.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Bruce, would you like to give out our email address?
I would love to give out our email address. If you want to send us an email, our email address is modeler'slife, modelers with one L, modeler'slife@gmail.com.
And we have a website, don't we, Tony?
Indeed, we do have a website and a Facebook page. The website is modelerslife.com, and that again is with one L, not two.
Yeah, not two L's like lifelike. And we have the Facebook page. And if you go to the website, there's all kinds of links there. And Matt Goodman, if you go to the website and you push and you want to download the podcast, you just push on those buttons that say, click here to download the podcast. I added that for you, Matt. And I think that's it. And Joe, do you remember what it is your job is next?
To sign off?
Yeah, you got to, at the appropriate moment, you have to say happy rails to you.
Yes. So happy rails to you.
Well, that wasn't the appropriate moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You've-
Okay.
So obviously you listened to all of our podcasts and some of them twice.
Yes. But it's been a while.
Well, Joe, as the sun slowly sets over the back 40 and we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say,
Happy rails to you.
It's another Lincoln Homer.